Staying home and staying inside means many of us are discovering skills we never knew we had, many of them in the kitchen. For some reason, baking bread has become a big thing. Flour has been flying off the shelves and is being kneaded into dough by novice bakers across the country.
Generally, if it weren't for the pandemic, people would pick up bread baking as a hobby because it's one of those classic hobbies that you can get a lot of enjoyment through the process. You can get a lot of enjoyment by controlling ingredients, and then the enjoyment of making something delicious that you are going to love and your family or your guests are going to love. I've been baking bread a little under 30 years. I started baking bread because my oldest son had food allergies, and so I took it into my own hands to try to bake bread that he could eat. At the time he was allergic to wheat, so I was using alternative flours. He has since outgrown his allergies, but I continue to love to bake, and I just continue to make bread. How I learned to bake bread was, there was a lady, maybe about 25 years ago, was selling a kneader, a bread kneader. And so that's kind of how I got into it. She also was selling a grain mill where you could buy the grains and make your own flour. So all that was intriguing to me. So I really learned from her because she had these tools and she would give classes in her home on how to use the tools to bake delicious loaves of bread. So I used her recipes and learned techniques from her. Really doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of time. In the beginning, yes, because you're trying to follow instructions, but once you do it a couple of times, you don't need to follow those instructions. You kind of just throw together the ingredients. You know what to do, you know the procedure, you know the technique.
I have been making bread for a couple years now. I feel like I've been making more bread recently, in the past several months, but it's always been something I've been interested in doing. It's just taken me a while to sort of get my process down. I think that I've been baking more bread since we've been quarantined. Obviously I have a bit more time, but it's also just something that's really comforting to have in the house and saves a trip to the grocery store. So definitely been making more bread for that reason. So this year, 2020, has been my bread making year. Making bread is something that I really enjoy because it's sort of a staple in everyone's diet. Even if you're someone who doesn't eat a lot of bread or stays away from that type of food, I feel like you can't say no to some homemade bread that's nice and warm. So I always share my bread with my roommates and with my friends when I can. I definitely learned from the internet and some good old YouTube videos. There's a lot of information out there. People have even written books about making sourdough and about making bread. But I think as you start to make bread, you sort of attract other people who are doing the same thing, and you can share information with each other and tips and tricks. I think I have always really liked baking things at home and making things homemade and knowing all the ingredients that go into my food. So something that inspired me to make bread was just watching other people that I admired make bread in their homes to share with their family. But it was also just something I had sort of thought about a lot because I was putting two and two together. If I was making all of my other food homemade, then why not my bread too? I think people have been baking a lot during this time because of the extra time they have on their hands. Baking is just one of those things that people always say they're going to do but never really have the time to. So now that we're all home all the time, it's something that we can do a little bit more readily. But also it's just something that's really nourishing and comforting. I mean, comfort food is a real thing, and right now we all need a little bit of extra comfort. Once that bread is done, it is such a satisfying feeling. You have to knead it multiple times. It's a pretty delicate process where you're keeping an eye on it all day. So it's something that's involved as far as it takes a long time, but it's also really easy to do. So it's just satisfying all around. It's like your little baby, and when it's done, it feels so good.
Keep trying, because there will be times where you will be baking bricks. Don't let that discourage you. Keep doing it. The more you do it, the easier it will become, and it really only takes a couple of times, and then you'll get to know how the flour reacts with water. You'll get to know the feel of the dough, and if you need to add more flour, if you need to sprinkle with more water. That only comes with experience, so you have to just keep doing it. So just bake a couple of loaves and you'll be on your way.